Access Tech Live, the latest in tech and accessibility with Stephen Scott and Mark Aflalo.
And coming up, we're going to be joined by Michael Babcock to talk to us from the 39th CSUN Assistive Technology Conference. Before we get to that, though, there's been a story just breaking. Mark, Apple in court.
Well, I mean, U.S. Department of Justice is claiming that Apple has maintained, and I quote, an illegal monopoly over the smartphone market by locking in customers and making experiences worse for rival products. They are suing Apple. This kind of reminds me of when the government went after Microsoft years ago. But the DOJ, along with 16 state and district attorneys, accuses Apple of driving up prices for consumers and developers at the expense of making users more reliant on its phones. We'll dig that into that deeper and probably get somebody on to talk about it. I can think of some people, but it was about time. I mean, it was bound to happen. Let's just say that somebody was going to point the finger and say, you have too much control. It's amazing how we chastise companies that are successful. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's true. But of course, it's not that dissimilar to what's been going on over my side of the pond. The European Union, of course, has been active in going after Apple for kind of similar things. Anyway, okay, interesting story. We'll come back to that. Thanks for that. But let's focus now on CSUN, which is happening this week, the 39th annual CSUN event, the Assistive Technology Conference, where there are many talks, many speeches that many people go for, but it's really the exhibition hall that interests us tech heads over here. Michael Babcock is joining us from the event right now. He's the host of the Pay On podcast, many podcasts actually. I think there's about 1,000 podcasts, Michael, you're currently
only
hosting
1,000
at the moment. Only 1,000 he's hosting, yeah. Michael, good to have you here on Access Tech Live.
Thank you guys for having me. It's amazing to get into my hotel room and breathe for a minute and hear myself think. So appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, it's a busy place. Tell us about the scene. Tell us what it's like there. Tell us, first of all, where you are.
Yeah, so I am in Anaheim. For those who don't know, this is Southern California, not too far away from Disneyland. We're close enough to Disneyland that you can hear the fireworks at night. So that's a pretty awesome experience. This is my first CSUN, and everyone kept telling me it's going to be busy. It's going to be busy, and I'm like, I'm a social person. I got no problem with busy. Oh man, it's very busy. So I heard about 3,600 people are here, and it is very overwhelming, sensory overload for sure, but it's an amazing experience. And I told someone this morning at breakfast, I said, what? I am coming back next year, no matter what I have to do, because it's been a great opportunity to connect with exhibitors and to learn a little bit, and of course, hang out with some friends too.
3,600 people, that doesn't seem like a lot in the grand scheme of things when you look at conferences like, CES and stuff. So it's an opportunity to get a little bit more intimate than you would otherwise, Michael. Is there anything specific that brought you to CSUN this year? Something specific that you wanted to get your hands on, experience firsthand?
So one thing brought me to the CSUN conference that I unfortunately don't get to see for about another 90 minutes or so. I had to set an appointment with him because they are probably one of the most popular booths there, and that's the Glidance. And that's a great experience, and I want to go play with that. And to touch on what you're just talking about, Mark, 3,600 people isn't a bad number, but when you have 3,600 people and 3,600 canes and 3,600 guide dogs, you got to add those numbers to it too.
Yeah, that's the reality. That's the problem, isn't it? That there's a lot of people there. And of course, you're at the California State University. That is what CSUN stands for. It's always important, I think, to let people know, because everyone calls it CSUN, but no one fully understands why it's called CSUN, so it's always good to mention that. Okay, so you're going to have a look at Glidance. We're going to talk a bit more about Glidance a little bit later, but there have been a lot of announcements already, and hardware announcements. I mean, even around Braille, for example, we saw Orbit Research announcing a couple of new Braille displays. What have you been hearing about that?
So Orbit Research did announce a new Braille display, the Q40, which has 48 Braille cells, and the Q20, and both of these have QWERTY keyboards on them. I did see a cool Braille display yesterday called the Activator, and what's really unique about the Activator is it has a Braille keyboard on it, and then what you can do is you can flip up these two clips on the left and right side, and then that Braille keyboard flips back and gives you a QWERTY keyboard. So you have the best of both worlds. If you want to use Braille input, you can, or you can use QWERTY input. It's a 40-cell Braille display. And the company that's behind the Activator has a unique technology where they can sense where your fingers are on the display and share that with a teacher. So a teacher can monitor up to 4 displays at once. And another feature of that is if you're reading along, you can have the Activator read out loud to you what you're reading and what's under your fingers, because they can sense where your fingers are. If you don't want it to be that verbose, you can turn that down a little bit and say, hey, if I pause on this cell for half a second or for a second, then read to me the letter and then give it to me phonetically. And I think that would be a great tool to teach someone Braille, or for someone who's learning Braille and who doesn't have experience with that. One other thing that I'll mention about this company is they have a 20-cell Braille display, and it's kind of cool because I touched it, because you got to always put your hands on things at a Braille booth, and it started playing music at me. I'm like, what is this? But they use that sensory technology on the Braille display itself, and when you run your finger across a cell and you read that Braille note, it's going to play that music note for you. And so it's a great way to teach Braille music notation.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the Activator, of course, just to be clear on that, is that is a device that's been out for a little while. Although, like you say, that this is the chance for you to get hands-on with a device like this. These are not available in Best Buy. That's the problem. That's why these events are so important, right? HIMSS International also launched a new Braille display as well, the Braille eMotion, which again has 40 cells. It has the Perkins input, from what I'm reading. It also has word processing built in and other tools. It seems like there's been a lot of Braille advancements. Would you agree?
Yeah, a lot of Braille advancements, and I'll tell you, I'm sure I don't have to tell either of you, actually. One guess, what do you think the buzzword is this year?
Oh, well, is it an acronym by any chance?
Yeah, so everything has AI. Everything, I don't think there's a booth I've gone to that hasn't mentioned AI in some of their materials and stuff. So Braille, AI, and also wearables seem to be interesting this year. I have not put my hands on the Envision glasses, so I'm going to go check those out. There's a new wearable called ARX AI, of course, because AI, and it is a headset. For those who can see on screen, I'm wearing a pair of Shocks bone conduction headphones. So the ARX headset looks a lot like the bone conduction headphones that I'm wearing, which sit in front of your ears and vibrate that bone. But on the right-hand side of it, it has a flat rectangle box that points forward, and there's 3 buttons on it. You press and hold the center button, which is round, and it will give you an opportunity to ask the AI a question about the text or environment that you're seeing right in front of you. Well, that you're not seeing, but that the camera is seeing. And then there's a repeat button and a back button, so you can get all that information and navigate that all from the headset, and you don't have to wear anything. The gotcha with it that made me a little sad is right now it only works on Android. It is tethered with a USB-C cable, and I asked, well, can't you use iPhone 15 and 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max? And apparently they said on the USB-C ports for the iPhone 15 line of products, Apple doesn't push enough power to power the headset.
Yeah, so you can't get the video capability from that. That may come in the iPhone 16, though. If they bring in, say, into the Pro a Thunderbolt port, that could be kind of cool. Just saying, Apple, that'd be nice. Now, it's interesting because you mentioned all this technology, and there's lots of interesting stuff there. But you also got hands-on, I believe, with something that seems to be my arch nemesis in conversations these days, a robot guide dog.
That is, well, I haven't got my hands on the robot guide dog. That
doesn't like being
robot
touched.
guide dog. So it's not a guide dog. It's a robot dog, and that's what threw me off, from Sony.
Oh.
And what Sony has done is they have, especially for people who, older individuals or people who may have autism or other challenges, who can't take care of a dog and all the needs that come with it, you can get a robotic dog. It's about the size of a small puppy, like a puppy lab, and it allows you to pet it. It likes to be pet. It likes to be scratched under the chin. If it does something positive, you encourage that behavior by, calling it a good dog. And if it does something that you don't necessarily like it doing, you can tell it no. It learns from your vocal cues. It does wag its tail, which I thought was pretty cool, and it bites. I scratched it under the chin, and then I left my hand right there, and it put my finger in its mouth and kind of bit down on it. It didn't have any teeth, but I thought it was kind of funny.
So, Michael, really the only benefit of this dog is it doesn't, poop. Really?
Yeah.
And you don't have to feed it. Dog food is expensive.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a very good point. Okay, so we talk about.
You do have to feed it. Sorry, hang on. You do have to feed it. You have to feed it electricity.
Oh, you make a good point, Stephen.
Yes, that's pretty expensive too in some cases.
That's a good point. We need to add a solar panel to his head. Okay, Michael, I got a question for you. So we've got stuff. There's obviously cool things to see in the exhibits, but there's a lot of conferences around CSUN as well. A lot of conversations going on. Is there anyone in particular that I got to attend this one for this reason, or the people in specific that that you've been trying to listen to or hear conversations with or have conversations with that you're going to finally have the opportunity to meet at CSUN?
Yeah, so Vispero, the company behind JAWS and ZoomText, I've been able to make some great connections with their team that you don't really get to make when you're on the support line or you're on the sales line calling them or on a Zoom call. That's been pretty awesome. I will say one thing no one warned me about when coming to CSUN is these after conference parties, I guess we'll call them, where the organizations put together a group of people that's, and I'm going to use air quotes here, invite only, and then all of a sudden you have 300 people in a hotel room and you can't even hear yourself thinking. So that was an interesting opportunity that I got into yesterday. And then the last one that I'll mention here is Cardiff over at Envision has been chatting me up on Mastodon, telling me, come see my booth, come over to the booth and check us out. So being able to make that connection and actually meet him and shake his hand and say, hey, I want to check out your Envision glasses. And what's this about Envision AI and some additional artificial intelligence coming with a voice assistant? So I'm excited to play with that and see what that's like too.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you're there in your own capacity. I know that in previous events we've spoken to you at, you're generally there selling your wares as part of your day job at AT Guys, and obviously doing your podcasts and all of that, which is great. But, I wonder, obviously we're inside the blind bubble, you and I, but, here on Access Tech Live, we like to broaden the scope a little bit. So you mentioned the dog, which actually is cooler than I thought it sounded initially. But any other tech that you've thought that is either blind adjacent, useful for people who are blind and have additional disabilities, or for people who have other disabilities? Anything that's caught your attention?
Yeah, so two things. Regrettably, I don't remember the name of the company of either of them. One of which, though, is a real-time signing service. So the way I envision it is IRA for people who have hearing impairments that need sign language interpretation. You open up their app, you call them up, and then they can provide real-time sign for you, and they can they can sign to you, and they can read people signing if necessary as well. So that's pretty cool to be able to get that information. They are working with Starbucks, which might sound a little familiar to those of us who use IRA. So if you go into Starbucks, you can use this service without any problems, and it doesn't cost. They do have a consumer-based plan, so you can purchase minutes that you can interact with the service on, and it works both on the iPhone and Android. That was really cool. And when I chatted with the gentleman there, I told him how excited I was to share that with other individuals. The other thing is AI, of course, because AI is everywhere. AI real-time captioning, especially on video content that is live on YouTube or other streaming services. There are some professional services that you can use to get those captioned, and then they'll go back and caption some of your older content. Primarily, they're focused on the education line of videos, but they eventually want to come in and say, hey, if you are a content creator, we will be able to help you with producing realistic and accurate captions for your content.
That's really cool. The real-time the communication thing is a company called SCOM, and the product is the UB Duo 3. I remember because I was looking at the list of exhibitors yesterday going, this is what we need to talk to. This is who we need to talk to. That's really cool. Michael, still another day of CSUN, obviously, today. Enjoy it. take it all in. I know you're going to want to go back next year. That's great. You're going to tell us if we should go there next year, which is the important part. And we'll talk again soon, and we'll find out what your takeaways were, because I'm really curious to see what some of the other things that'll come out of it, because you're just scraping the surface here.
Yep. And was only there for one day. Appreciate you guys having me. And of course, you need to come next year. No questions asked there.
Okay, well, we'll see you next year then. That is Michael Babcock. Coming up, there have already been a couple announcements from this year's conference, Be My Eyes and Vision, and more. We'll chat about those after a quick break here on Access Tech Live, and we'll check in on that Microsoft event.
There's more Access Tech Live to come. Get involved and have your say at Access Tech Live on social media. We'll be right back.